Kevin Stefanski watched as Shedeur Sanders sat motionless on the sideline, again, while Dillon Gabriel failed to convert yet another crucial third down. And this time it wasn't just a Cleveland crowd booing. It was London. The Browns' 21-17 loss to the Minnesota Vikings at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium wasn't just another disappointing game. It was an organizational unraveling, broadcast to an international audience that didn't need backstory to understand something was seriously wrong.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Foreign press didn't even pretend to be diplomatic. European analysts, unfamiliar with the Browns' long history of chaos, were openly confused at how a quarterback like Sanders, hyped, mobile, undeniably talented, was riding the bench while Gabriel misfired under pressure. This wasn't strategic. It was stubborn. Stefanski's refusal to budge, even as the offense sputtered and momentum slipped away, has become the defining image of the Browns' dysfunction. Behind the scenes, whispers of performance-based bonuses in Gabriel's contract, and internal pressure to justify previous decisions, offer some explanation but not justification. The optics are brutal. Sanders, arguably the franchise's most marketable player, has been benched not because he isn't ready, but because the organization can't get out of its own way. Ownership isn't blind to it. Reports suggest serious tension between leadership tiers, with upper management growing frustrated with coaching decisions that prioritize pride over production. Stefanski's handling of the quarterback situation has become symbolic of a deeper fracture inside the Browns' hierarchy, a power struggle between what should happen and what won't happen, because someone in charge refuses to admit they're wrong. This all exploded on the most global stage the NFL could offer. The league handed Cleveland a gift, a chance to show off talent, expand their fanbase, and position themselves as a serious franchise on the rise. Instead, they brought dysfunction overseas. Now, instead of international goodwill, the Browns leave with global criticism, fractured team chemistry, and a rising star quarterback likely questioning his future with the team. The fallout has already started. Social media lit up in real time with fans questioning why Gabriel got another start. Videos of Sanders' expressionless stare from the bench went viral within hours. Even neutral analysts began calling for Stefanski's job, not because of one loss but because of this loss. The one that proved Cleveland is still stuck in a loop of mismanagement, ego-driven calls, and wasted potential. The locker room? Divided. The front office? Reportedly fuming. The season? Hanging by a thread. Sanders, through no fault of his own, has become the face of the franchise's failure to evolve. And now the Browns have to ask themselves the hardest question of all. How much longer are they willing to sacrifice wins, trust, and talent just to save face? In London, the answer was clear. They chose pride over progress, and the world saw it live. The Cleveland Browns weren't just beaten in London, they were exposed. The final score, 21-17 to the Minnesota Vikings, might look like a competitive loss, but the numbers on the scoreboard aren't the ones that matter. What matters is that a winnable game became a global spectacle of dysfunction, thanks to a coaching staff that refused to make the most obvious, logical, and desperately needed move, putting Shedeur Sanders in the game. Let's call it what it is. Organizational malpractice. Sanders wasn't hurt. He wasn't unprepared. He wasn't outmatched. He was simply ignored. Despite demonstrating in practice that he was more than ready to take the reins, Sanders stood on the sideline while Dillon Gabriel struggled. And this wasn't an isolated call, it was the continuation of a pattern that's now turned into a full-blown crisis. Kevin Stefanski, the head coach at the center of this disaster, is no stranger to criticism. But this latest decision, or indecision, didn't just earn him local backlash. It drew international condemnation. Fans, players, and media alike were left baffled by the refusal to utilize Sanders in a game that desperately needed a spark. Even European sports media, relatively new to the NFL's endless controversies, immediately called out the irrationality. There were no creative explanations. No layered strategic logic. Just pride. Plain and simple. Stefanski's unwavering commitment to Gabriel wasn't about game flow or long-term development. It was about protecting a decision he's been clinging to for weeks, a decision that's now costing him the locker room, the fan base, and possibly his job. And Gabriel? He didn't rise to the moment. He didn't collapse entirely, but in key sequences, those high-pressure moments where games are won or lost, he came up short. Again, that's the problem. He's consistently not enough. And yet, somehow, he's still the starter while the most promising quarterback on the roster watches in silence. This isn't just a personnel issue, it's a leadership breakdown. Because when Sanders was benched, the team didn't just lose an opportunity. They lost direction. They lost trust. And they made it painfully clear that performance doesn't dictate playing time in Cleveland. Politics and ego do. Sanders wasn't the only one frustrated. Viral clips showed him on the sideline, helmet in hand, expression unreadable but undeniably tense. Behind him, teammates looking equally confused, equally resigned. The optics were damning. No one looked like they believed in the plan. Because there was no plan. Just damage control wrapped in delusion. And let's talk about the financial angle, because this story has layers. Reports suggest that Gabriel's contract includes performance bonuses or guaranteed money that make benching him more complicated than it should be. In other words, keeping him in the game may be less about competition and more about cost containment. If that's true, it's even worse. It means the Browns are prioritizing financial calculations over football logic. It means they're willing to waste a season, and maybe even a star talent, in order to avoid triggering a contract clause. That kind of thinking doesn't just lose you games. It corrodes your culture. And Sanders? He's the collateral damage. A young, marketable, media-savvy quarterback with the poise to handle big moments, and he's being sidelined in favor of a guy who, at this point, is just taking up space. This entire situation has exposed Cleveland's deeper issues: ownership interference, coaching inflexibility, and a front office that either can't, or won't, step in. The refusal to adapt is now costing the team much more than just a win. It's burning credibility at every level of the organization. The international stage didn't just magnify the problem. It cemented it. When a global audience, unfamiliar with the inner politics of the Browns, can still recognize the irrationality of the situation, you've reached a level of dysfunction that can't be explained away with press conference talking points. And the fans? They're done. The boos in the stadium weren't isolated. They echoed across social media, talk radio, and every sports outlet in the country. Even British fans, some of whom were witnessing their first NFL game in person, left the stadium wondering why the best quarterback on the Browns roster never saw the field. That's not just a PR problem. That's a structural one. The fallout is real. Ownership is reportedly frustrated. Media insiders are calling for sweeping changes. And the locker room? On the verge of fracture. You don't lose games like this without losing faith. You don't ignore talent like Sanders without losing players' trust. And you don't double down on a mistake like this without inviting consequences that go well beyond football. This is now a tipping point. Stefanski has a choice: evolve or implode. He can own the mistake. He can admit Gabriel isn't the answer. He can give Sanders the reps he's earned and take a step towards salvaging the season. Or he can stay the course and watch this locker room unravel. Because the longer this continues, the more likely it becomes that Sanders won't just sit quietly. He doesn't need Cleveland. Cleveland needs him. And if the Browns aren't careful, they're going to lose him. To another team, to another system, to another organization that sees what they refuse to. And when that happens, this won't be a footnote in Browns history. It'll be the headline. The moment they let the future walk out the door because they couldn't set aside their egos. This is bigger than quarterback controversy. This is organizational decay. You can't call yourself a playoff team when your decisions are driven by pride. You can't claim to be building a contender when you bench your most dynamic player out of fear of admitting you were wrong. And you can't expect your fans to keep showing up when you keep giving them nothing to believe in. There's still time to fix this. But not much. Start Shedeur Sanders. Give him the keys. Let him grow. Let him lead. Let the fans see that there's something worth investing in, something that looks like a future. Because if the Browns don't change course now, it won't just be a lost season. It'll be a lost identity. So what do you think? Is it time to move on from Stefanski? Should the Browns hand the offense to Sanders now and finally do what they should have done weeks ago? Or is this dysfunction too deep to fix mid-season? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because whether the Browns turn this ship around or sink it completely, this story isn't going anywhere. And something tells us the next chapter is coming fast. At this point, it's hard to say what's more frustrating: the fact that the Cleveland Browns lost a winnable game in front of a global audience, or that they chose to lose it by refusing to put Shedeur Sanders on the field. Either way, the result is the same: another crushing defeat, another round of media outrage, and another example of this franchise actively working against itself. The London game didn't need to be a disaster. It could have been a breakout moment not just for Sanders, but for a team that's been desperate to prove it belongs in the upper tier of the NFL. Instead, the Browns managed to do what only the Browns seem capable of, turning potential into embarrassment on a world stage. Let's stop pretending this is about development. Let's stop pretending Dylan Gabriel is the answer. Let's stop pretending the locker room doesn't know exactly what's going on. This was not a failure of execution. It was a failure of leadership. The decision to keep Sanders on the sideline was never about football. It was about pride, about fear, about power dynamics behind closed doors, about a coaching staff, and likely an ownership group, that would rather lose games than lose face. And that's exactly what they're doing. Gabriel, for all his qualities, has not delivered. He's underwhelmed. He's stalled in key drives. He's been outplayed in practices by Sanders, and everyone knows it. But for reasons that defy every shred of football logic, Stefanski has continued to roll him out like nothing's wrong. And every week it gets harder to justify. This latest loss was the breaking point. Because it wasn't just a loss, it was avoidable. The offense wasn't moving. The Vikings weren't dominating. All it took was a spark. One drive, one change of pace, one quarterback with the ability to extend plays, shift momentum, and rally a team that clearly needed something, anything, to believe in. That quarterback was on the sideline, fully healthy, fully ready, and fully ignored. The cameras knew it. The fans knew it. The team definitely knew it. Sanders, pacing behind the line, watching yet another 3-and-out unfold in front of him, didn't have to say a word. His expression told the story. And the story is this: the Browns are sabotaging themselves. This isn't just about Sanders anymore. It's about what he represents. He represents accountability, a willingness to take risks, a shift in direction, a symbol of progress, energy, and possibility. The Browns instead chose comfort, familiarity, the same failed script. And now the only thing they're consistent at is losing the games they should win. The frustration from fans is no longer just anger, it's exhaustion. This franchise has asked for patience for decades. They've sold rebuilds and culture shifts and next man up narratives like clockwork. But here we are, again watching a season unravel, not because of bad luck, not because of injuries, but because of leadership that refuses to evolve. And the stakes are getting higher. With every loss, the playoff window narrows. The locker room grows colder. The calls for change get louder. And Sanders? His time on the bench becomes more of a scandal with every passing minute. This isn't a quarterback controversy. It's a quarterback crisis. And the Browns made it all by themselves. Let's talk about the internal damage. Because you don't make a move like this, week after week, without consequence. Veterans who've laid it all on the line don't appreciate losing for the sake of a coach's pride. Young players don't want to spend the start of their careers watching their team squander talent. And leadership? They can only spin so many stories before the walls close in. You cannot build a winning culture when your decisions are shaped by fear of being wrong. That's exactly what's happening in Cleveland. Stefanski and the front office made their bet on Gabriel. That's fine, coaches get it wrong. But the refusal to pivot, even as evidence mounts, even as the season slips, even as the locker room watches in disbelief? That's not leadership. That's negligence. Meanwhile, Sanders is doing everything right. He hasn't lashed out publicly. He hasn't thrown the staff under the bus. He's shown up, stayed prepared, and played the part. And still, no snaps. No shot. No accountability from the people holding him back. At a certain point, you have to ask, how long will he put up with this? Because if this keeps up, if the coaching staff continues to sideline a player with this much potential, this much upside, this much value, there's no reason to think he'll stay. And if Sanders leaves? If he ends up on a team that values his skill set, builds around him, trusts him, and lets him lead, the Browns will not recover from that. We're talking about a player who should be the future of the franchise. And right now, he's being treated like an afterthought. It's a devastating waste of opportunity. Let's also address the business side, because it's not just about wins and losses. It's about visibility, growth, brand. Sanders isn't just a quarterback, he's a draw. His name, his background, his media presence, it all brings attention and relevance to a franchise that desperately needs both. But instead of capitalizing on that, the Browns are letting it rot. You know what other teams see? A player who's been mismanaged, overlooked, and potentially available. Every game Sanders doesn't play, his stock rises, somewhere else. In Cleveland? They're just watching it happen. Ownership is reportedly frustrated. That's putting it mildly. There are already murmurs about front office tension, coaching shakeups, a potential organizational reset. But none of that means anything if they won't fix the problem staring them in the face. Play Shedeur Sanders. It's not complicated. It doesn't require a long-term overhaul. It's not a gamble. It's common sense. Start the quarterback who gives you the best chance to win. Start the quarterback your players believe in. Start the quarterback your fans are begging to see. Start the quarterback who should have started 3 weeks ago. If they don't, the Browns won't just lose more games. They'll lose their future, their credibility, their fan base, their locker room, all of it. And the sad part? It's all self-inflicted. So what happens next? Do they keep pretending Gabriel's the guy? Do they keep hiding behind contracts and press conference cliches? Or do they finally wake up before it's too late? Because let's be real, if they wait much longer, they won't just have a quarterback problem. They'll have a franchise collapse. Let's stop pretending the Browns are just figuring things out. There is no strategy here. No master plan. No hidden genius behind the curtain. What we're witnessing, week after week, is a franchise paralyzed by indecision and driven by pride. And the refusal to play Shedeur Sanders? That's not just a bad call, it's a symptom of something deeply broken. Because if you have a quarterback who's ready, who's talented, who's right there, and you still refuse to put him in, that's not a football decision. That's ego. That's internal politics. That's dysfunction disguised as discipline. And in the Browns' case, it's now the defining trait of the entire organization. Let's rewind. The team flies to London to face the Vikings in a high-visibility international game. Stakes are high. Attention is massive. A real chance to show the world what they've been building. But instead of making a bold move, instead of playing the quarterback with the most upside on the roster, they ran out the same tired formula and hoped no one would notice. But everyone did notice. You can't hide mistakes in a spotlight that big. The Browns tried to control the narrative, but the narrative wrote itself the second Sanders was left on the bench. Again. 21-17. That was the final score. Close game. Winnable game. But the Browns never had control, not of the scoreboard, not of the locker room, and certainly not of the situation. Because what they could have done was obvious. And what they did instead was indefensible. Shedeur Sanders was never part of the plan. Not because he wasn't capable. Not because he didn't earn it. But because admitting he should have started would mean admitting the current plan failed. And Kevin Stefanski? He can't do that. That's where this all spirals. Coaches get things wrong. That's part of the game. But when a coach refuses to pivot, refuses to acknowledge the evidence, adjust the approach, and put the team first, that's when it turns into a full-blown collapse. Gabriel didn't get the job done. He hasn't gotten it done. And he's not suddenly going to become a different quarterback 3 months into the season. He is what he is, limited, predictable. A quarterback who won't lose you games badly, but who also won't win them when it matters most. And every week the Browns insist on keeping him in, that ceiling gets lower. That window gets smaller. That hope dies a little more. This could have been a turning point. That game in London could have been the start of the Sanders era. Instead, it became a symbol of everything wrong with the organization. A franchise too scared to adapt. Too proud to admit they're wrong. Too rigid to realize they're sinking. And now the entire NFL is watching. Other teams are seeing this situation unfold and licking their chops. What? Because quarterbacks like Shedeur Sanders don't just appear every season. He's young, he's polished, he's hungry, and he's available. If not contractually, then at least emotionally. You don't think his team is keeping receipts? You don't think there's already internal discussion about how long they're willing to let this ride? Because let's be honest, why would Sanders stay in Cleveland if this is how they treat him? This is a guy who should be getting reps, leading drives, building chemistry, taking real snaps in real-time situations. Instead, he's being iced out for a quarterback with a contract the front office is too scared to bench. And that's the truth no one in the building wants to say out loud. This isn't about talent. It's about contracts, incentives, and a refusal to admit that money was spent poorly. They'd rather sacrifice a season than take the PR hit of admitting they were wrong about their starter. And that decision is costing them everything. Let's break it down further. When you refuse to play your best players, the locker room notices. Veterans start questioning the process. Young guys lose faith in leadership. Everyone gets quieter, less engaged, less committed. Why? Because what's the point? Why give 110% when your coaching staff clearly isn't? Why bust your body in practice when the guy lighting it up at QB still can't get on the field? Why believe in a system that punishes preparation and rewards politics? That's where the Browns are right now. Drifting. Leaderless. Emotionally flat. With a coach who keeps trying to convince everyone that sticking to a broken plan is somehow brave. It's not brave. It's delusional. And fans? They've seen this movie before. They've lived it for years. Quarterback purgatory. Coaching turnover. Organizational instability dressed up as patience. It's exhausting. And now, with Sanders sitting on the bench while Gabriel runs the offense straight into the ground, they've had enough. The booing isn't just about one game. It's about all of them. It's about all the times this franchise promised things would be different. That they'd build smart. That they'd be aggressive when necessary. That they'd finally prioritize winning. And yet here we are, again. A quarterback who could shift the entire trajectory of the team being ignored in favor of saving face. A coaching staff so locked into a decision that they'd rather crash the plane than change course. An ownership group watching from a distance, reportedly displeased, but doing nothing to stop the bleeding. This is how teams lose their soul. And if Sanders walks, that's exactly what will happen. Because let's be honest, he deserves better. And he knows it. So what now? The Browns have reached the point of no return. If they keep doing what they're doing, the outcome is clear. More losses, more division, and eventually a total collapse. Stefanski won't survive the season. The locker room will fracture. And Sanders? He'll be gone the second his contract gives him leverage. Or, they can change. They can bench Gabriel. Admit the mistake. Start Sanders. Let him lead. Let the team reset. Let the fans believe again. It won't fix everything overnight, but it'll be the first honest step this organization has taken in weeks. It's the only move left that isn't pure damage control. And frankly, if the Browns don't make that move, they're telling everyone exactly who they are. Not a team chasing a championship. Not a team building a culture. Not even a team trying to win. Just a team trying to not look wrong. At any cost. So, Browns fans, how much longer are you supposed to wait? Let us know in the comments. Should Sanders demand a trade? Is Stefanski cooked? What would you do if you were running the show in Cleveland? And don't forget to subscribe for more brutal breakdowns and behind-the-scenes drama. Because with the Browns, there's always more where this came from.